Calum Vaughn. These days, I guess you could say a computer musician. Wouldn't necessarily say electronic musician. I do a lot of electronic stuff, but all stuff involving computers. Algorithmic music, electronic music, content creation. I guess my first sort of like introduction to music when I was a kid, started playing the guitar. I don't know, my dad taught me some basic chords when I was like 8 or 9 years old, something like that. We were huge fans of The Prodigy. We wanted to know how they make their music. You know, it doesn't sound like an instrument. And we discovered it was made on Reason 3. And Reason 3 was my first step into all of this. Started making tunes on there. Later graduated to Logic and then to Ableton. And here I am today. I'm still making music and sort of like interactive multimedia projects using Ableton, Max MSP, Pure Data, software such as this.
And what are you up to right now? Sort of this year?
Right now, this year has been kind of interesting. I guess with this current lockdown at the moment, it's given me a lot of time to start working on some new projects. The last one, I was finishing up a master's degree, so I didn't have much time to do that. So this time I've been working on a lot of stuff. Currently I'm exploring Node for Max a lot. I don't know if you've heard much about it, but it's a way of using Node's JavaScript in Max MSP, so you can pull information from websites.
So for the sake of those listening who might not be up on their coding and that, you want to delve into the software you're working with, like Max and such?
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm using this software called Max MSP. Currently I'm using it as a part of Ableton. Ableton's excellent. They call it a digital audio workstation. You can make your music on. And Max is an audio programming language that goes hand in hand with Ableton. So it's kind of like, I often describe it as like a musical sandbox. There's kind of like endless possibility and ceiling in terms of what you can achieve. So for example, if I was using something in Ableton, like a MIDI effect or some sort of plugin, but it didn't quite do what I wanted it to, I could take inspiration from that and recreate it, customize it in Max so that it's sort of like catered exactly to what I want it to do. So yeah, it's like very much like a musical sandbox, a toolkit where you can create software for yourself or for others to use.
And have you got some kind of ultimate goal in mind?
I mean, I guess I haven't really thought about that too much, but something I would really like to achieve throughout my sort of development is trying to aim to create algorithmic music that can pass as completely human. This is something that's been tried and tested for years, many years, decades, you know. And although methods are getting better and better, it's still always this sort of uncanny valley feeling with algorithmic music. So yeah, it'd be very interesting to see if in the future I could find some sort of way, a sort of universal rule that would allow algorithmic music to sound human and natural. Okay?
Yeah, because I think of all the like interviews I'm gonna do this month, and that, you know, this one will be the most out there, definitely, with my frame of reference to you, because I worked on this at uni partly. I worked with Max and coding, and I did a lot of research on algorithmic music and that for my dissertation. But then generally I tend to go around with other musicians. I mean, you're just as much a musician as I am, but our frame of references, they start to be so different once you get into stuff like this. Just the way that we work. So it's kind of hard for me to kind of draw parallels at times with where you're going, the things that you're trying to do, which is partly the reason I wanted to do this, just to get that. I wanted to try and maybe get a handle on, you know, what's going on in your head when you're working with these, you know, systems.
Yeah, sure thing. No, it makes sense. It makes sense. I was going to say, as I was saying earlier, like with Max, I'm currently working as much as I can on sort of, I guess you could call it data sonification. So trying to take data and turn it into music. Um, Things like, for example, I'm currently trying to create this software that allows users to join a Twitch chat and type in their city. And when they type in their city, it will pull information from a weather forecast website, and it will make music and visuals out of that weather forecast. So it's kind of like an interactive multimedia musical experience.
How's it working out so far?
Pretty good. It's kind of pretty hard work, I have to say. It's kind of been, I guess I've like graduated into the rounds of lower level programming because Max MSP, the language I was talking about earlier, is very accessible. It's very visual. It can be quite a good way to begin learning programming. But there's no actual code being written. It's all visually represented. So now that I'm working in Node.js, that's completely different. I have to learn JavaScript. So that's been a real challenge for me. I couldn't do it without tutorials on YouTube. There's some really excellent content that's been helping me get along my way. But yeah, because it's quite niche and specific, I can't find anything that tells me how to do it. I have to figure it out for myself. So it's really developing my problem solving and sort of giving me a good introduction to JavaScript and code in general. The actual system is set up. You could go on the Twitch chat right now, type in your city, and in my Max patch, in my Max MSP software, it will come up with all of the information instantly about weather in your city. However, the part that I haven't currently sorted is the musical sonification of it, of turning that data into something audible and visual. So yeah, that's the next step.
And do you find that like trying to explain what you're doing like this comes easy or not? Is it easy to kind of just distill down into its base elements, or you have to get technical with it when you're bringing it across?
No, I mean, I wouldn't say I have to get technical with it necessarily. When I was doing my masters, one of the most important things I was told by my supervisors and stuff like that is you are not confident enough and you don't know enough about your own idea if you can't explain it to anyone in layman's terms. So, for example, my one had kind of a fancy name, the semi-real-time use of Markov chains in algorithmic electronic dance music, full of jargon. And if I tried to explain that to my mum, for example, she wouldn't have a clue.
Yeah.
So it was very important that I figured out how to describe these things in layman's terms. And yeah, I think that's a good skill that I developed. So yeah, I used to struggle with it, not so much anymore, but it can still be difficult, of course.
So
it's easy to slip it terms. Sorry.
So if someone sees you at work and they say, "Oh, what are you doing?" Could you just give me like a canned response to your practice?
Sure. I mean, what for what I'm working on right now or in the past?
Generally, just I mean, when I'm pretty up on my musical language, I like to think. But when I see people like you doing stuff like this, I really start to kind of get outside of my comfort zone. So if I just see if I see you doing your fancy coding moves, and I just say, "Well, so what's that? Like, could you give me a sentence or less?"
Sure. So
a sentence that I'd understand.
Right,
so like,
sure. In terms of the weather forecast software I was telling you about, I guess you could call it data-driven multimedia or data-driven interactive multimedia.
Right.
So it's interactive multimedia. It will consist of audio, visual, sort of interactive elements, buttons and things like that. But it's data driven. I guess that's the key there.
So
There's
kind of like
data.
a virtual concert or something for like an interactive
Yeah,
type.
for sure. For sure, virtual concert would be a good way of describing it. Maybe not for the weather one, but yeah, virtual concert, virtual musical experiment, something along those lines.
Hmm. So what could you advise anyone like for how to get into this if they're from a layman's point, just to how you maybe got your start and how you'd advise other people who would want to get theirs.
Yeah, sure. So I think when it comes to audio programming or programming in any form, any programming language, people quite often get very intimidated by thinking that they need to learn everything, that they need this enormous foundation in maths and physics or something. And I thought like that, I was trying to take extra maths classes and things like that when I was first getting going because I thought somehow it would help me. But what I started to realise, and why I express this to all sorts of people, is you first want to think, what do I want to make out of this? So if you are wanting to get into audio programming, what do you want to achieve? Because that's the way you're going to learn the best, is by creating something that you want to make, that you enjoy. You don't, in Max MSP, there's all sorts of very complicated and frankly boring stuff that you could do if you wanted to and would help give you a bigger foundation. But for me, I was very fascinated by the idea of randomly generating music, and that was my first steps into Max. I created something that very basically just randomly chose some audio clips to play together, and that was it. And for me, it was a very easy start, and that really sort of gave me the momentum that I needed and the sort of basic foundation. So yeah, I would say to people, you could think of it like a normal language. No one knows every single word in the English language, do they? Or in any language.
No.
You can't know everything. So it's important, I would say, for beginners, people who want to get into this, to identify what your goals are. Find some beginners content, some YouTube tutorials, a teacher that would help you, and yeah, just work on what you want to do. And I think the rest would start to come easy over time.
And this is you think this is pretty much like the future, to put it, bluntly?
I don't know. No, not necessarily, because I mean, people will always make music in general forms, any form.
Not so much that music will all be algorithmic. It's just that the way that, if of all the boundaries to push, this really is going where people just have not gone before. I'd say just the way the stuff I see you doing, the stuff I see other people doing with with algorithmic. You're just really pushing the envelope here.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, certainly in terms of, I think the biggest thing that people are focusing on right now, which could be, like you said, the future, is the connectivity part. The fact that I can now make some software which uses some code to take information from a server on the other side of the world, the weather website, send it back to me instantly, and then I'm streaming it, and then somebody can type in a chat and it will immediately affect all of that data. That is crazy. That's like, we're living in this very interconnected world where, you could use these programming languages to connect to anything, even things that you'd think wouldn't be possible. I've had friends that have linked Max to mechanical projectors, like things that don't even use electricity, So, yeah, we're in this kind of time now with so much amazing technology, little things like the Raspberry Pi computers, Arduinos, small, cheap, affordable mini computers. It's providing this opportunity for people that's never existed before, where you can just basically connect everything to create your art. So, yeah, I definitely think this multimedia interconnectivity approach, it's going to set the sort of pathway for a lot of creative projects in the future, most likely.
So there's just this revolution going on in tech, for music especially.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's not just music at all; it's everything. But yeah, music certainly benefits from it in the same way.
So I mean, because I just never could get my head around Max. I did it for about 2 years, and I really ended up resenting it, to be honest, because I think it was because of the amount of work I had to do. I think it was that, and it was everything else. And I got through my degree and did pretty well on everything, and then I actually forced myself to dedicate an entire module to coding just so I would get better at it and I would understand it better.
Yeah.
And I took I kind of did a whole like diary on my my getting to grips with Max and my experience creating plugins, analyzing all the building blocks and how they work together.
Sure.
And
yeah, I think
go on.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's classic, like everything else, where something's always less enjoyable when you have to do it.
Yeah.
As part of a university course, for example. I had times in uni where I was working on these Max patches, and even though I came up with the ideas, it was just, the last thing I wanted to do because, frankly, it's deadlines, it's work, it's student, it's hard, But it's interesting to know that these days I don't have to do any Max. This is all just for fun.
Yeah.
And I'm for sure doing it more than ever. I think, to really tap into these kind of things, you want to be doing it for fun, basically. You want to be enjoying it, doing it in your spare time. And I guess that's where the magic really happens.
But I mean, I could see the potential there. I love the idea of like creating music algorithmically.
Yeah.
Because I'm big on my improvising and stuff, and I spend a lot of time just trying to be the best improviser I can and set myself up with like a constantly renewable source of music to draw from. And then it's like when you put that in like a coding format, that's interesting to me. I could never get to grips with it, and I would always just end up getting frustrated because I would work so hard on trying to just understand these little pieces. I'd spend like an entire night just on this one little problem, like a line of code that wouldn't work or an object that wouldn't work, and I couldn't work out why. And I in the end, I cut my losses because I've got so much on my plate, being a music tutor and just trying to do that well and become skilled with that. I think I ended up just throwing in the towel.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, it's certainly not for everyone. There's no shame in not enjoying it either, because I don't know. I guess some people love it. Like, I don't know. I can't get off it from the start. From my first year in uni, I was doing it. But I teach the Ableton and Max classes at DMU, and frankly, I may be out of like a class of 10 students. Perhaps I'll get 2 that really actually enjoy doing it and don't get extremely frustrated, So I guess it's like everything. It's kind of like I don't think anyone should force themselves to do it and to feel that they have to do it, because at the end of the day, they can still provide ideas to people that do enjoy doing it, and they can still get the work done, second hand. So you can still curate projects. But actually, it's like being a product designer. Do you want to design a product, or do you want to be the person soldering it all together? For a lot of people, it's the creative side that's way more important, and they get bogged down with the programming. So yeah, I don't think just because someone struggles with it or struggles with programming that should put them off the methods, because they can still make interesting stuff happen for sure. That makes sense.
Yeah, it just always felt a little out of my reach,
Well, you should, if you ever have any ideas or things that you'd want to do in Max, you should send them my way, and I can try and make them happen for you. Because then it's like, for example, I've been working on a plugin all over summer and up until now for this dude in America, he doesn't do Macs. He uses Ableton. He uses Mac's devices, but he doesn't know how to create them from scratch. He posted on a Facebook group saying he wanted a device that would do this, X, Y, and Z. I started working on it for him, and he just came with more and more ideas, and it's just developed into this really, really cool device that he wouldn't have had a clue how to make, and I didn't really when I started. But yeah, we've basically worked on it together. He's the sort of designer, I guess you could say. I've been the programmer, but it's been a really good team. I don't think we could have done it any other way. I couldn't have thought of the idea. He couldn't have realised the idea. So that's why you need um, different disciplines sometimes for this sort of thing.
Mm. So it's the same. I'm seeing patterns here. I mean, it's the same dynamic you'd get between different musicians and producers and whatever. But it's like it's in a coding context now. Your engineer does this. You have specialized knowledge. You can do this for, him, her, to build these these ideas, realize them.
100%, yeah, for sure. No, you can't be can't have your eggs in every basket. You can't do everything. And for example, my weakness when it comes to programming is programming clean. Like, I can always make something work after a while, but if I showed my code to a real sort of a programmer that's got like sort of classic training in it, they'd probably want to delete it and start again. It's maybe a bit of a mess. Probably not very CPU efficient, things like that. So yeah, if I wanted to develop that, then yeah, I'd need to find someone else who could help me out there.
So have you been working on like making yourself more like a more disciplined programmer, like a better trained one?
100%. I mean, and I think it sort of comes naturally. To be fair, I put myself down a little bit there. I'm not terrible with it, but I used to be for sure. Little things. I don't know how much you want me to get into this, but little mechanics within programming where you need to have an order in which events happen.
Yeah.
And I didn't know about that. I was just plugging things in, hoping for the best. And eventually I came across a problem where nothing was happening how I wanted it to. Things were happening at the wrong times, the wrong places. And that forced me to ask questions, and then ultimately forced me to realise, right, I'm not doing this right. There's more efficient ways to be going about that. So, yeah, I wouldn't say I'm actively trying to make myself more disciplined, but I think it's just happened naturally, really, across encountering problems, basically troubleshooting, debugging, is ultimately, sort of improved my way of coding.
Well, do you get like do you get that kind of elitism from other programmers, and does it put you off? Or
it's terrible, mate. It's terrible, of course, especially on certain Macs forums and Facebook groups and stuff like that. You can post a question or a comment about something, and you'll basically just get shouted on by all sorts.
I loathe that attitude. I really do.
Yeah, it's unfortunate there's that, but to be fair, for everybody that does that, there's two super helpful people.
Yeah, I think it just drives away people.
Certainly.
Because when I was getting into composing first, I spent a lot of last year working on sound effects libraries and composing stuff for people's games online and things, and just kind of advertising my work. And the amount of shit I would get from random people for just coming onto a forum and like trying to introduce myself. That same thing. You get the people that they set up shop, and I guess they feel like you're stepping on their toes or something.
It's just gatekeeping, mate. It's gatekeeping. People that it's like they have one purpose in life, and if anyone even gets something slightly wrong, they're to assert their dominance, to look like the big guy. Yeah, so it's a very unhelpful attitude. I've had several friends that have tried to get into Macs. They've gone on these groups and asked quite a simple question, and you'll have people just say really nasty stuff. If you're struggling this early on, you might as well give up now. And people will, they'll hear that. They'll be like, right, this is not a friendly community, and then they won't touch it again, which is really sad because it's not all like that. It's if you, I guess it's luck of the draw if you get someone like that who is responding to you. But yeah, at the end of the day, you get that in everything, really. You could apply that to any form of music or art or technology stuff. You're always gonna have dickheads in the world.
Yeah. Well, so like I pretty much struggled from day one to learn the simplest like commands. So like, what would your advice to someone like me be if they wanted to get to grips with a musical programming in a musical context?
Well, like I said, going back to what I mentioned earlier, I would say first step is pick something that is going to be fun and engaging for you. Really think, what do I want to do with this? Just say, for example, I find DSP, digital. Wait, what the fuck does that even sound like? Digital signal processing. I find that extremely boring, personally.
Yeah.
If I was a beginner and that was how I was introduced, I'd probably give up straight away. So I would say step one is figure something out that you yourself really want to enjoy, that you know that you would stick with to get this eventual outcome. Second of all, I would say, there's just so much resources online. That's where I started personally. I had some teaching, obviously, at the university, but there's 3 or 4 different YouTubers that do amazing Maximus P content. And for me, just searching through them and finding something relevant to what I wanted to achieve, that was amazing because it really gave me the sort of first helping hand, the sort of stepping stones into doing what I want. And I say, thirdly, probably goes hand in hand with the whole YouTube thing, is just find somebody that's using this language. I learned so much from one of my tutors in second year. I was struggling at times, and just being able to go hang out with him and work with him on something like on a one-to-one basis massively helped. There's some things that you can't really learn in books or on YouTube videos and stuff. You need to be there with somebody. Unfortunately, not really possible these days, but you can still do it on Zoom and stuff like that, So to summarise that, I would say, got to find something that you're interested in. It's not going to work if you're not interested by it. Secondly, get help, YouTube, friends, anyone that's interested. And third, I would say, pretty much the same with everything. You could use like learning a language as an example. Just do it every single day, basically. Even if it's 5 minutes. You're having a bowl of cereal for breakfast and you just have a quick look over some different objects and their help files, that will help massively. If you're doing it just once a week as part of a university routine, then it's not gonna go in your head,
So you got your start in object-based programming.
Yeah.
That was your first.
I guess no, well, to be fair, not really. I started my first programming was when I was a kid. I used to make like websites in HTML and CSS.
Yeah.
So nothing too crazy complicated. HTML was fairly simple, but CSS, that was a little bit harder. That was my first steps. And when I went to college, I started computing. And it was absolutely terrible. In fact, this is a perfect example of of what I was talking about earlier, perfect parallel, because I got a E or a U overall and ungraded. My teacher, honestly, he was the most miserable, like uncreative person I've ever met. And we were using a archaic programming language that nobody uses anymore. And more importantly, we were like assigned these weird tasks to do on it, and my task was to create a database to organise swimming lessons. And it's just like, what do I care about that, man? Like obviously you have to start somewhere, but he knew that I was a musician, and I think that he could have assigned me a task, create a sequencer, create a synthesizer, or something like that. But he gave everybody the same boring task to do with database processing. And that could be the difference between someone being interested in programming and not. Um, during that, I thought, right, this isn't for me. I did terribly, and yeah, my sort of passion for it all was taken away. But luckily, I was reintroduced to Max in my first year at uni, but I certainly did not go to uni expecting to get involved in programming again. I felt like that was the end of that.
So what's your kind of preference for working object based generally?
I guess yeah, it's what I'm more familiar with for sure.
I mean, how many formats are there? Maybe not every single one, but like generally the ones you work with.
I mean, generally speaking, you'd have three. You'd have machine code, so very what you'd say low level programming, basically binary, hexadecimals, things like that. Back in the old school days, my dad used to have to program games and stuff on Amstrads and Commodore 64s and things, literally by typing in zeros and ones, which is just crazy to think about. So yeah, that was machine code, and then you've got low level languages, which are the sort of classic text based languages that you see, on the Matrix with the code falling down on the screen elegantly, and then third of all, you'd have, I wouldn't say object orientated, because objects, is quite a general term in programming. It's used in lower level programming as well. Yeah, visual programming languages. I guess would be the third, and for sure it's what I'm most used to. But I am aware that it can have limitations, and it can also cause sort of like bad coding etiquette, as we were talking about earlier. It kind of like, I guess it sort of skips over the basic foundations of programming.
I mean,
drives you straight into the practical side.
Have you seen any sort of bad practice that has, had an unintended effect, like it's made something special happen?
Yeah, sure. I mean,
kind of like the punk of programming,
Yeah, I mean, in Max, one of the most fun things to do, and I kind of encourage students to do this, is just plug stuff in that isn't supposed to go into each other. Like what happens if you get this waveform and you multiply it by another waveform? Like what's that going to do to the sounds? Obviously, it's not meant to happen, but it's interesting to find out. And yeah, that can often result in some extremely unexpected, weird results that might be very usable for other projects.
So you're sending an effect to itself, effectively.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. Sort of like, I don't know if have you ever done no input mixing before? Or circuit bending?
I've been shown how to send an effect to itself via bus and just seen what happens.
Sure.
That's if that's anything close, because otherwise you're kind of losing me there. But
yeah, no, you're bang on. I mean, basically, you've got these like circuit bending is taking a circuit. So just say you bought a synthesizer, you take the case off it, and you pretty much get some crocodile clips and start like connecting things that aren't connected and see what happens. Mike Patton from Faith No More, Mr. Bungle, he's a huge advocate of it, and he actually describes it almost like this parallel universe, of this kind of like unexpected world of creativity. Nobody designed it. It wasn't meant to be there. But it's exciting because of that reason. No, it's untouched ground, essentially. So yeah, it's like similar to that. Errors and glitches can, sort of yield very nice results, and obviously develop you as a programmer as well. More bugs and errors you encounter, the better you get.
And then, like, the better you get, do you have kind of a cleanliness, approach? Like, you see bad code and it annoys you or something?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, if I looked back at some of my patches from years ago, oh god, yeah, it would be kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
Um, I had the same tutor I was talking about earlier. He, yeah, he was extremely pedantic when it came to code. Everything had to be segmented perfectly. Everything had to be separated and labeled, and all of the cables and stuff like that all had to be perfectly straight. And at the time, I was thinking, what's the point in this? I'm here to make music, not to decorate my patch. But after a while, I realised, yeah, that organisation is so important. Yeah, so although I'm probably not as tidy as I could be, I certainly make sure everything's nice and modular these days, labelled so that I can come back to it and know what I was doing.
Yeah.
Things like that, yeah.
Yeah, I think the finesse thing just comes with time.
Like, yeah, absolutely. It's like anything, mate. Like playing your scales on the guitar.
Yeah.
I'm sure you knew the C pentatonic, whatever, like 5 years ago, but I bet you can play it better now and cleaner, and
Well, yeah.
without even thinking. So yeah, it's just something that comes with practice for sure.
I mean, I was doing a blues guitar lesson, and then what I was doing was basically making them do the heavy lifting. I was saying, like, this is your scale, but don't just play the scale. The scale is your structure. You should use the scale to say phrases, musical phrases.
Sure.
Like that. Like, I want you to like put your fingers in places and like work out what you can do.
Yeah. So that's what she said.
Keep it professional. So yeah, it's that thing. It's like you can give someone a system, and you can teach them every little facet of that system, and you can be very uncreative with it. Or you can say, well, here's your here's an outline. Do something. Make something of your own. Is the thing I'm
absolutely, yeah. I think it's super important with anything creative like this. If you just show somebody how to do something, like literally give them every step and say, well done, you did it, is certainly not the same as, like you said, giving them a structure and teaching them to work within it. Yeah, because you quite often I'll get students with Max that say, is this the right way of making this? Is this how I'm supposed to do it? And it's like, well, does it work? Yeah, it works. So why does it matter? It's all about finding your own way around these things. And, innovating.
So like what? So like things you've learned about music when you've started coding.
Yeah, sure. I think the biggest thing that I learned is just how music is just made out of numbers, basically. I never really realised that before. I encountered numbers, like, for example, when you're doing a chord progression and you're saying chord 1 to chord 3 to chord 5 or something along those lines.
Yeah, that's basically it.
In tabs, you have numbers. I never really realised that every single scale can be represented as numbers, and chords and drums and everything, like literally everything. The only thing that you could debate that can't be represented through numbers in music is emotion, and I'm still convinced in the future that will be possible. But I guess that's one of the biggest things for me. Is kind of like, I'm no maths genius, really. Like, I'm not that great at maths. It's just learning how to pull the maths from music. Learn to how to sort of represent music with numbers, and then you can let the computer do the rest of the maths for you. I guess I always assumed that to do something like this, I'd need to have a massive math background, but no, I don't think you do.
So, I mean, they've been doing stuff like this for forever now. I mean, you'd think of, when you hear the term algorithmic music, your brain tends to go to to a high-tech, futuristic place. But they've been doing this since, they invented music notation. They've been doing this for how many hundreds of years, I don't know, but
Yeah. I mean, one of the earliest. There's probably earlier, but the earliest example I know is Bach.
yeah,
Everyone knows Bach, the composer, um, and because of the nature of his work, he was creating chorales for the church,
the parallel
Catholic
fifth
Church.
thing.
Yeah. So yeah, he was having to churn out 3 of these chorales every single day. And if you were creating those musical pieces from scratch, that would be impossible probably. Um, but yeah, he came up with a formula. He worked out formulas. He gave chords and cadences and notes and scales and everything numbers. And yeah, he devised a formula. And although he didn't have a computer to do that for him, he was still using algorithms in music. That was algorithmic music. It's music that followed a process essentially. And yeah, like as early as 1951, I think the first computer algorithmic music piece was created in the Bell Labs. So yeah, that was massive as well. I think that just is kind of similar. It basically completed like phrases and cadences and stuff like that based on what had already happened. So it was fairly similar to Bach's methods. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Algorithms of music have existed for centuries. Computer assisted only for 70 years or so. Um, yes, technically there's nothing new really. We just have better means to achieve it. And going back to what I was saying earlier, everything's just so much more connected these days. You can imagine when that first computer in the Bell's lab was used, you can imagine it would probably take up an entire factory space with like enormous like cables and stuff like that. But now we can just sit on a laptop in a coffee shop with no charger.
And this is the work that Max Matthews would have been doing around that time.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
Because I remember part of my dissertation was on that, and yeah, I had an anecdote I was thinking of that I can't remember now, but it was like the first. I think they invented the first algorithmic musical piece consisted of like vowels or whatever, which was a system they used way before computers were ever a thing. Well, they would set. They would set them to vowels.
Sure. Yeah, the vowels. Yeah, you're right. It was with the I think it was called Artisked.
Yeah.
RTSKED, I believe it was called. And yeah, like you said, it was working with like Chowning's FM stuff that was going on, and yeah, the setup would have been absolutely enormous. Yeah, very different to what we've got these days.
I think it was I remember now. It was the pit when you were talking about the computer that would fill a room, and then there was only one at the time, and it took like a team of people to use it. And it would overheat a lot, and then I think the Navy came in and hijacked it so they could use the formulas for missile launches.
Wow.
And then
interesting.
Yeah, before the word computer referred to a computer, it referred to a person who would do
that computes.
Yeah, who would do trigonometric equations.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, have you looked at like how equations can work and how they can influence your coding, anything like that?
Yeah, I have actually. There's a few good objects in maths that take an expression as an input, and you can use it in various ways. I guess one of the main forms that I've used that in is creating effective sort of like lines, like graph sort of like expressions. So, for example, you could tell. I'm just trying to think of an example for you. Like, just say you were in maths and you wanted to create a riser, like a filter sweep or something like that to act as a transition. And the obvious thing would be to just say, right, automate it in a straight line going up over so many seconds, going to go from 0 to 100. But our ears as humans, we don't really like straight lines. It sounds quite unnatural when it's applied to musical stuff. It's much better to use like an exponential curve or something like that, like an expression that can be applied to how something is modulated and changed. When I realised that, I started using expressions a lot more in Max for automation and modulation. There's all sorts of other ways you can use it. You can use it to create random data instead of just having random number generators. You can use an expression that sort of like applies stochastics to it, so that it's not completely random. There's probability. There's like kind of like infinite possibilities when it comes to mathematical expressions. They're certainly just as relevant as ever.
Right. So you could like compose me a guitar piece according to pi or something. Depends what expression you want to put in.
Yeah. I mean, the golden ratio is always a classic.
Right.
Pi. I'm sure you could do something with pi. I've been learning about, I believe it's the number E. Is it E or C? Yeah, E. 2.71828 infinite. It's one of these irrational numbers, or impossible numbers. I was using that to... God, what was I using that? Oh, yeah, it was for neural networking. So I have this idea of having an algorithmic music piece being streamed on Twitch, and just say people are changing it, they want to change it to sound a little bit better. And I can take that data, those changes that people have made, and in theory, I could use a neural network, machine learning, to learn that information and apply it in the future, right? But for a reason that I can't explain to you because it's well over my head, it's deep math stuff, you need this number E. You need the number 2.71828 when it comes to anything involving machine learning. And why that is, like I said, I couldn't exactly tell you. It's all to do with this special curve that you need for the neural network to learn. Without that number, neural networks wouldn't exist. AI development wouldn't exist. Machine learning wouldn't exist. It's interesting.
So where can you see this going ultimately, do you think? Like, do you think we might in the future have like algorithmically generated pop music and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I would not be surprised if that wasn't already happening, to be honest.
So just an equation for a hit song, basically.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I guess what you could do, the thing is, it's constantly changing, isn't it? What is a hit song today would be very different to what was a hit song 20 years ago in the charts. People, their tastes change, their influence and culture and stuff like that all changes. But, just say right now, we wanted to say, right, let's make a Drake-style pop song, this sort of thing that's in the charts a lot at the moment. I guess in theory, what you'd want to do is you could take, say, 20 of these songs that are big hits, find patterns, chord progressions, beats per minute, rhythms, production techniques, all this sort of stuff. Sort of like structure it into a bit of a framework, and you could absolutely make a software that would create a new hit song. But I think things would need to become a little bit more consistent for that to happen, because right now it's just everything's changing constantly.
Yeah.
By the time you develop something like that, the new trend probably would have kicked off.
I don't know how interesting or intricate it would really be,
Yeah.
Not to talk down on pop music or anything, because I'm not a music snob. I just it's like there was that video on YouTube of the guy doing like 20 choruses in a row of hit songs from that year or that decade or something, just with the same chord progression. And it was like a loop of 3 chords. And then people were posting it and commenting about it and saying that this is like the reason pop is shit, and that we need new blood. And, you know, I don't think that, but I mean, it kind of, I think things do get formulaic after a while.
I can certainly see his perspective, and frankly, I feel like the main motivation to do something like that would actually be more in the lines of like capitalism than creativity, because, you know, if you're using algorithms to create something new and unique, that's a creative project. It's going to sound new and unique. If you're using algorithms to regurgitate what already exists, I feel like the main motive behind that would be time, efficiency, speed, money. You know, you could get a piece of software to just churn out 1,000 tracks in a click of a button, and then you just immediately send them to whoever is checking this stuff, and they might, you know, they've just got so much choice, and they pick one, great, you know, you didn't even have to write it. All 999 of the others are trash. Just if you, I thought about doing it, to be honest. I thought about how cool would it be if on Spotify you like algorithmically release things. You know, you could create a max patch that just instantly churns out 10 songs in a specified style, and then you just bounce those tracks, release them on Spotify, click the button again, make another one, release it under a new name. So you could actually sort of like spam the music industry with your music. I've thought about doing that,
right?
Because I think that would be a little bit more interesting, as opposed to sort of like algorithmically making something that you know that people are going to like. It's almost like quantity over quality in music. Like, you know, you hear a lot of people say, you know, sometimes, sadly, it's not about the skill involved. It often can be just like a bit of luck, you know, that somebody finds your song.
I think there's always some kind of skill involved, I think.
Of course, no, there's always skill involved. But if you have a look at just for example, the YouTube algorithm, the amount of shit that will get 20 million views, you know, that will be absolutely talentless rubbish.
Yeah.
Like, for example, like hey there, guys, here's top 10 things you didn't know about cheese. Something like that, right?
Yeah.
Like, very minimal effort. But it gets the views. It gets picked up in the algorithm. You could easily do something that just churned out hundreds of those videos, you upload them, and you're kind of like much more likely to get the views. And
I mean, people did. We had the Finger Family videos thing.
Yeah.
That is an example of like the nightmare of algorithmically generated content taking over the internet.
Yeah, for sure. But I think it's quite interesting. Like, I don't know, if I could make something that was varied enough that it would produce a piece of an album, you know. I didn't even write. I wrote the code to make it, and then I just released 100 different versions of that. I reckon like at least one of them would be the best one. You know, you're going to have a best and the worst, or whatever. And you'd imagine that out of those 100, one of them would get a little bit extra exposure. You know, it could be the start of something. You could get, you know, you could make 100 pseudonyms, release 100 albums under 100 pseudonyms, and only one of them just happens to get added to a Spotify playlist, something like that, and then boom, you've got a name for yourself.
Yeah.
So it's crossed my mind to do that, but I'd want to make sure I did it tastefully, creatively. You wouldn't want to be just spamming people with crap music, you know.
So speaking of, before we wrap up, have you got some stuff you want to plug?
I mean, go check out my YouTube, which I don't even know the name of. Hang on 1 second.
Yeah, send me the links afterwards. I'll put them below the video and all.
Yeah, for sure. Sure. There's Calum Vaughn on YouTube. All of this is kind of like early works. I haven't got much up there yet, but I've got some Ableton and Max tutorials. And you can check out my Twitch if you're interested in the interactive multimedia stuff that I was talking about earlier. twitch.tv/CasmoviTV. I'll post you the links. Yeah, that's about it. I'm not really on social media hypes, so.
So yeah, but the whole point of me doing stuff like this is so I can talk to other musicians who I relate to or not, and they can just give me this food for thought, basically, and
Awesome.
then just share this around,
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good thing that you're doing, and I guess it's a good alternative for in the past, when we'd showcase musicians and gigs and open mic nights and stuff. Can't do that anymore. So
we'll get back to that soon, but until then,
yeah, I bloody hope so, man.
But
my social skills are really dwindling.
Yeah. So there was nothing else you no other projects you got going on? Anything else?
Just trying to think. There's that plugin that I was telling you about. That's going to be pretty cool. It's a way of like auditioning lots of different audio effects with a click of a button.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a survival of the fittest, but for audio plugins and algorithmic plugins. Sorry. I'm frog in my throat. Yeah. So that device is sort of like a survival of the fittest, a way of comping audio effects and MIDI effects, algorithmic stuff. That's going to be really cool. It's a nice, handy workflow tool, I would say. Other than that, I'm teaching. I'm making some of my own music, just without any algorithms or anything, just normal making music, which is important. Sort of like reconnect to the roots, I think.
Yeah. You miss that human touch you get from playing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when you look back at it, like I was saying earlier, I started playing the guitar. That's obviously where the passion began. Sometimes I'll go a year without touching the guitar, and you suddenly realise, like, damn, I need to do that more, reconnect with your roots,
Yeah.
It can certainly get a little bit, if you're just constantly doing computer music, you can feel a little bit disassociated from the experiences you get from performing, from writing, the emotional side, it's important to do that for sure.
So I think we'll leave it there, man. Thanks so much for coming on.
No problem. Thank you for having me. It's a lot of fun.
I'll get some more content underway, and I don't know, maybe once COVID ends, we could do something else.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, COVID doesn't have to stop things. These days, like we were talking about earlier, you can do all sorts of crazy stuff across Zoom calls and things like that. Control each other's computers and do crazy stuff like that. So I'm sure we can think of some collaborated stuff that we could work on, for sure.
So you've been reading my emails for the past hour.
What's that?
hacking me as we do this interview.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, cool. Okay, cool. Yeah, all right.
Cool,
I'll see you around, man. Thanks so much for coming on.
No problem at all, dude.
Yeah.
And I'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, cool. Take it easy.